Welcome to the WRAL Daily Download. I'm Jack Hagel. Immigration and border security are top issues for voters in the upcoming election. Some Republicans say the Biden administration's policies have basically turned North Carolina into a border state. Our PolitiFact team reviewed state records to check immigration claims on crime, schools, and the state's social safety net. WRAL PolitiFact reporter Paul Specht joins us now to tell us what he found out. Paul, welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
Paul, when you look at political ads or read some of the comments from Republican candidates, what picture are they painting when it comes to immigration?
One word they've used is invasion. In their campaign ads that are on television, they show images of people hopping fences and running through the desert. They talk about the border being completely open and suggest that this is a problem not only for Texas and Arizona and California, but the rest of the country. And they've linked it to things like crime and schools and whether or not our nation can afford for these people to come across the border.
And it's not just on political ads, right?
Right. Republican lawmakers here at our state legislature earlier this year wrote a letter to Governor Roy Cooper, who's a Democrat, and called on him to send the National Guard to Texas to help shore up the border. They've raised questions about migrant facilities here in North Carolina and elsewhere. And on the campaign trail, we've heard different numbers thrown out as to how many people have crossed the border and how many people are in the U.S. illegally.
Why is immigration such a front and center issue these days for these candidates?
Well, polling shows it's a big issue for Republicans specifically. WRAL News poll found in the last year that it was the number one issue for Republicans. And then if you overall, you throw the Democratic opinions in there, it comes in at number 6. So, and our poll also found that across the board, Republicans and Democrats, a majority of people want to see something done to better secure the border. So it's front and center because in some ways, many voters want it to be.
Now, you are our resident fact checker, and you put some numbers to these claims. From a high level, what did you find out?
We found out that there's very little on paper in state records to support a narrative that people are coming across the border and draining our state resources, whether it's unemployment or Medicaid or overburdening our schools, things like that, and crime. And when it comes to crime, there's not much there either. Now, crime stats tend to lag. It takes a long time for the FBI and the SBI to collect data from various local law enforcement agencies and analyze it and compare it to previous trends. So we're a year behind on that. But right now, we don't see anything that critics of current immigration policies could point to say, look how the immigration policies of the Biden administration is affecting North Carolina. There's not one stat that stands out.
Well, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll go through some of these claims. Stick around. Welcome back to the WRAL Daily Download. We're talking with WRAL PolitiFact reporter Paul Specht about immigration. Paul, let's walk through some of these claims that you checked. First, legislators have claimed that immigration is causing increased crime. What did the numbers show you?
Well, one reason it's difficult to track that, to pinpoint that question of how much crime do non-citizens cause and how much crime is caused by people here illegally in the country, is because it's not tracked. It's not tracked by the Attorney General's office, by the State Bureau of Investigation, or other state agencies that chronicle the types of crimes that happen and by who. What we can look at is broader trends. In North Carolina, the SBI does have complete data for 2022 and previous years, and we can see that violent crime, murder, rape, robbery, and aggravated assault has been going down since the pandemic. And that's part of a national trend. If we look at Federal Bureau of Investigation stats, they also show a downward trend. In fact, PolitiFact found earlier this year that 2023 is on track to have one of the lowest crime rates in the last 50 years. So broadly speaking, the thinking is among analysts that if people crossing the border were causing a surge in crime, we would see it. We would see more of it. And now that's not to say they don't commit crimes. They do. People who are here illegally certainly do commit crimes. And we've seen that even in North Carolina. There was a man, Awet Hagos, excuse me if I pronounce his name wrong. He was in a standoff with Gates County law enforcement earlier this year. And there were also the Sotelo brothers. In 2022, they shot and killed a Wake County sheriff's deputy. At least that's what they're alleged to have done. But so obviously it happens. But even in those cases, it's hard to pinpoint that violence on one president's border policy. And here's why. Hagos, the man who was in a standoff with Gates County deputies, he entered the U.S. legally in 2016. And then when he was supposed to leave, according to his visa or his papers, he just didn't. And so whether or not you can blame the Biden administration, it's hard. We don't know. ICE said that they could not tell us when he was required to leave because that's private information. And then with the Sotelo brothers, they don't even know when they entered the U.S. It could have been under Biden. It could have been under Trump. They don't know. So all that to say, the stats that people want are not available in real time as they wish. But what data we do have does not suggest that people here illegally are driving a surge in crime.
Now, what about drug trafficking from the border? Some politicians have claimed that there's a link between the U.S. border and drug overdoses across the nation. What did you find out?
You know what? There's some truth to that, but there's some details about how it works that need to be clarified. Fentanyl is a synthetic opioid that's being used to cut a lot of drugs. It's more potent than a lot of people and even a lot of users expect it to be. And so it's caused overdose deaths to skyrocket, not only in North Carolina, but across the country. A lot of it does come from Mexico, but experts say the majority of it is not coming on the back of, some mother who's trying to bring her child across the Rio Grande. It's coming in cargo ships and tractor trailers that are going through regular ports of entry where they meet immigration officials and security guards and things like that. It's just hidden so well that it ends up, they're able to get it through, and they get it through to local gangs who then distribute it. So there is a link. Is it one that, say, a huge new border wall could fix? No. Experts that we spoke to said that the best course of action would be to improve scanners at these ports of entry so that they can better detect fentanyl coming in. And one more stat that we should point out. Between 2019 and 2023, 86% of the people convicted of trafficking fentanyl were U.S. citizens.
Now, what about schools? That also seems to be part of this discussion. Are non-citizens really overburdening North Carolina schools?
When it comes to determining whether non-citizens and people here illegally are straining resources, that's also hard to detect. I know it sounds like a cop-out, but it's not. We went to these agencies and asked them specific questions, just like the one you just asked, and said, hey, how many non-citizens are in public schools? How much has it grown over the last few years? And they say a Supreme Court decision from years ago in the 1980s led to most state agencies, education agencies, led them away from tracking student citizenship status. The thinking is, even if they're here illegally, you want kids to be educated so they're not even a bigger burden on the nation as a whole or your state as a whole. We checked out one instance that was mentioned by Republican legislators earlier this year. They said, hey, there's an example in New Hanover County, that's where Wilmington is, on the coast, where they thought about closing a special needs school to open a school for non-citizens. That's what their letter said. It's the same letter that they sent to Cooper. They mentioned this case. It turned out the details on that didn't exactly line up. For instance, the New Hanover did consider closing a career readiness academy. Now, they do serve some students with special needs, but they are not considered a special needs school by the state, according to the Department of Public Instruction. So that description was a little off. At the same time, New Hanover leaders were considering putting all their services for multilingual students into one place. In the end, none of it happened. They decided to keep things as they were, but New Hanover pointed out they didn't consider citizenship status because they've been instructed not to, just like they've been advised not to, just like other public school systems in the state. So, if we can look at English learners, and it shows state data shows that English learners accounted for about 8% of the public school population in 2019, and that's gone up 2.5% to 10.7% of all public school students are English language learners. Now, again, that says nothing about their citizenship status. That's just how many kids are learning English in our schools.
Now, what about things like Medicaid and unemployment benefits?
We're not seeing any evidence of them burdening those systems either. Right now, non-citizens account for 2% of all claims for unemployment benefits. And then, a couple of years ago, maybe it was just last year, time flies, the state Republicans and Democrats expanded Medicaid, and non-citizens account for about 2.1% of enrollees. And so, that's out of 2.9 million people on Medicaid, about 2% are non-citizens. And again, we don't know if they're here legally or illegally. There are certain qualifications you have to have to get on Medicaid. But again, these numbers don't speak to, a surge of needs from people who cross the border illegally.
Some politicians claim that non-citizens are signing up to vote or have even already voted in previous elections. That's been a topic here in North Carolina.
That's right. For years, it's been an allegation by Republicans that Democrats want to allow more immigration so that those people turn around and vote for them. However, it takes a long time to become a citizen so that you can vote. You cannot vote if you're not a citizen in federal elections. And it's been that way for quite some time, and it's been that way in North Carolina for quite some time. In fact, it's already in our state constitution. Nonetheless, Republicans here and in other states are trying to ensure that there is no confusion over this topic. And so this year, Republicans here are proposing another amendment to our state constitution that would reiterate that you cannot vote if you're not in this country legally, if you're not a full citizen. There has been no evidence of non-citizens voting in North Carolina elections in a way that would swing them. That would be the deciding vote. The most we've seen was back after the 2016 election. There were 19 citizens who voted when they shouldn't have. 16 people pled guilty, and mostly to misdemeanors. But we've seen at PolitiFact cases across the country. I believe there was one in Kansas where someone voted illegally. They weren't a full citizen. They were deported. So there are severe and harsh consequences sometimes for people who participate in our elections illegally. And so, we spoke with our Board of Elections officials about this. They explained how they check people's eligibility. That's in our story. People can go read it. But again, we didn't find any evidence that non-citizens are illegally participating or swaying our elections here in North Carolina.
We're going to hear a lot more immigration rhetoric as we approach the November elections. Paul, thanks for helping us make sense of it.
Thank you.
That's WRAL PolitiFact reporter Paul Specht for his in-depth look at immigration rhetoric. Go to the PolitiFact section of WRAL.com. I'm Jack Hagel. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for listening to the WRAL Daily Download and for making us part of your morning routine. Another great way to get WRAL news is the Morning Briefing newsletter. It's a daily email with Triangle news, events, and headlines to help you get ready for the day. Sign up at WRAL.com/newsletter.